Queer. Adjective. Strange, odd. Noun, informal, offensive, a homosexual man. Queer has definitely been reclaimed, but it has often been used to hurt and to cause pain. And I think those are often the words that we need to reclaim the most. Queer is inclusive and exclusive all at the same time. For me, that word really encompasses masculinity and femininity and neither and both in terms of whatever body that can come in. Bisexual didn't work for me. That word, at least for me growing up, was actually really limiting. Lesbian really didn't work for me. Queer fits for me. We all have many identities, and something that's really salient for me is definitely my multiracial identity. I am Black and Indian by way of Jamaica and Italian, and I come from a mixed family. Queerness was not necessarily something that was completely distant when I came onto the word, because I already understood a fluidity in terms of race. The fluidity of queerness and the fluidity of being a racialized person in this world were very closely linked. Even as a queer identified person, I am often read as straight because I'm femme presenting. And as a person of color, I'm not read as what I am. So I understand identity is fluid. I understand attraction is fluid. I understand race is fluid. I understand of all of these things as sort of moving categories instead of stagnant. But I think generationally, in terms of people's individual histories with queer, it's not always so well accepted. And I think that's because queer has a deep history of being derogatory. And even today, it can still be derogatory, right? There's a difference between saying I am a part of the queer community and then me walking down the street and being called a queer. Those two things mean something very different. I think those are often the words that we need to reclaim the most. In practice, I realize that queer is very academic and inaccessible. If I go home and say I'm queer, like my family literally has no idea what that means. And I think that's true for many families. And even though I identify very strongly as queer and I consider myself part of a queer community, I understand that that word has limitations. I think if we're truly gonna be a queer community and people are gonna embrace that, then we need to not talk about it in such an academic, inaccessible way. If we're going to move forward as a community, I think we need to recognize that not everyone in our community is going to call themselves queer. I think while it's really important to understand queer theory and to definitely expand our narratives past gay and straight, I think ultimately we also need to just listen to one another and listen to where one another is coming from, and to understand that not everyone is going to have the queer lingo down. But that doesn't mean that their experiences and their membership in our community is not valuable. And I think it's important that we just start really listening to one another past labels. My name is Zaneta Rago. I use she and her. I identify as a queer woman of color.